The soldier stood at the edge of the forest, his breath visible in the cold night air. The mission had been simple, reconnaissance on an uncharted planet, but nothing about this world was ordinary. Its twin moons cast an eerie glow over the landscape, bathing everything in shades of silver and blue. He adjusted the strap of his rifle, scanning the horizon for movement. Something about this place felt alive, as if it were watching him back. He wasn't alone anymore. A rustling sound came from behind a cluster of luminescent trees. His training kicked in immediately. He dropped into a crouch, weapon raised, finger hovering over the trigger. But what emerged wasn't one of the feral creatures they'd warned him about during briefing. It was her, a figure unlike anything he'd ever seen or imagined. Her skin shimmered like liquid starlight, shifting colors with every step she took toward him. Long flowing hair that seemed woven from threads of moonlight cascaded down her shoulders, catching the faint breeze. She wore garments that appeared to be spun from light itself, ethereal yet somehow solid enough to cling to her form. Her eyes locked onto his, and the soldier froze, not out of fear, but because something deep within him recognized her presence. Those eyes weren't just windows to her soul, they were galaxies unto themselves, swirling with emotions he couldn't begin to comprehend. They held curiosity, determination, and something else, something softer, warmer, that made his chest tighten inexplicably. "You," she said simply, her voice carrying a melody that resonated through his very bones. It wasn't loud, but it filled the silence around them as though the universe itself had paused to listen. "You are the one." The words hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him momentarily speechless. He blinked, trying to process what she meant. Was this some kind of ambush? A trick? Yet there was no malice in her expression, only an intensity that burned brighter than any weapon he'd ever faced. "What do you mean?" he managed finally, his voice rougher than he intended. His grip on the rifle loosened slightly, though he didn't lower it entirely. Caution warred with instinct, and instinct was winning. She tilted her head, studying him as though he were both familiar and foreign all at once. "In my culture," she began, each word deliberate and measured, "we are allowed only one mate for life. One bond, chosen once, never broken." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she stood mere feet away. Her gaze never wavered. "And I have chosen you." The soldier's heart thundered in his chest. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. This couldn't be real. Aliens didn't exist, at least not like this. And even if they did, why would she choose him? A human soldier, scarred by battles and bound by duty? What could she possibly see in him? "I don't understand," he said finally, shaking his head. "Why me? We've never met before tonight." Her lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "Time is different for us," she replied cryptically. "Your kind measures it in seconds, minutes, years. For my people, it flows differently. I have known you long before now, across lifetimes you cannot yet perceive." The weight of her words pressed down on him, heavy and surreal. Across lifetimes. That sounded like nonsense, the stuff of myths and legends. Yet standing here, staring into those endless eyes, he found himself wanting to believe her. There was truth in her tone, conviction in her stance. She radiated certainty, as though she'd spent centuries preparing for this moment. But belief didn't erase doubt. "Even if what you're saying is true," he countered, his voice steadier now, "how can you know I'm worthy? You don't even know me." Her smile softened further, almost tender. "Worthiness is not decided by deeds or titles," she said gently. "It is written in the essence of who you are. Your courage, your resilience, your capacity to love despite pain, all these things call to me across the stars. You carry a light within you, faint though it may seem beneath the shadows of your past. I saw it, and I chose you." His throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to him like this, not with such reverence, such unwavering faith. Not even his comrades, who respected him as a soldier, had looked at him this way. To them, he was a tool, a weapon honed for war. But to her, he was something more. Still, the enormity of her declaration left him reeling. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath, lowering the rifle completely. "I'm just a man. A human. How could I possibly live up to whatever expectations your people have?" "You misunderstand," she said softly, taking another step closer. Now she was close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her, though it wasn't heat, it was energy, pure and vibrant. "This choice is not about living up to expectations. It is about becoming whole together. Two halves finding balance, creating harmony where none existed before. My culture believes such bonds transcend species, worlds, even time itself. When two souls are meant to unite, nothing else matters." Her hand reached out slowly, hesitantly, until her fingertips brushed against his cheek. The touch sent a jolt through him, electric and grounding all at once. For a fleeting moment, he forgot where he was, forgot the mission, forgot everything except the sensation of her presence. "I don't know what to say," he admitted quietly, his defenses crumbling under the weight of her sincerity. "This isn't how my world works. Love, relationships, they're complicated, messy. People change their minds, break promises, walk away when things get hard. What you're offering, it's permanent, irrevocable." "Yes," she agreed without hesitation. "That is why the choice must be made with absolute clarity. Once given, the bond cannot be undone. It will bind us for eternity, shaping our lives, our destinies. But tell me, soldier," her voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and raw, "have you not grown weary of impermanence? Of connections that fade like smoke on the wind?" Her question struck a nerve, piercing through layers of armor he hadn't realized he still wore. Yes, he was tired. Tired of loss, of loneliness, of fighting battles that never truly ended. He wanted something real, something lasting. But could he trust this? Could he trust her? Before he could answer, a distant rumble echoed through the forest, pulling him back to reality. The mission. He had a job to do, responsibilities to uphold. Whatever this was, whatever she was, it couldn't distract him from that. "I need time," he said abruptly, stepping back and breaking contact. The absence of her touch left him colder than he cared to admit. "I can't make a decision like this right now. Not here, not like this." Her expression faltered for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. "Time is a luxury we may not have," she warned, her voice tinged with urgency. "Forces beyond either of us are already moving. If you delay too long, the opportunity may vanish forever." "What forces?" he demanded sharply, suspicion creeping back in. "Who else knows about this? About us?" She hesitated, her luminous eyes clouding with unease. "There are those among my people who oppose such unions. They fear what lies outside our traditions, outside our borders. If they discover I have chosen you—" She trailed off, unwilling, or unable, to finish the thought. Great, he thought bitterly. Just what I needed. Intergalactic politics complicating an already impossible situation. "I'll think about it," he said firmly, though his resolve felt shaky even to himself. "But I can't promise anything. Not yet." She nodded slowly, accepting his answer even as sadness lingered in her gaze. "Then I will wait," she vowed. "However long it takes, wherever you go, I will find you again. Because this bond has already begun, whether you acknowledge it or not." With that, she turned and walked back into the forest, her form dissolving into the shadows until she vanished entirely. The soldier stood rooted to the spot, his mind racing. Everything about this encounter defied logic, reason, sanity. Yet as he stared after her, one thought refused to leave him. What if she was telling the truth? Days passed, or perhaps weeks, he lost count. Time blurred together as he continued his mission, gathering intel on the planet's ecosystem and its inhabitants. But no matter how hard he tried to focus, her face haunted him. Her voice echoed in his dreams, her touch lingered on his skin. Every shadow seemed to whisper her name, every star reminded him of her eyes. He told himself it was absurd. Ridiculous. He was a soldier, trained to follow orders and complete objectives. Falling for an alien princess, or whatever she was, wasn't part of the plan. And yet, The memory of her persisted, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness like a wound that refused to heal. One evening, as he sat by a makeshift campfire, a sudden noise startled him awake. At first, he thought it was another wild creature drawn to the flames. But then he saw her silhouette emerge from the darkness, just as radiant and otherworldly as the first time. "How did you find me?" he asked, rising to his feet. His pulse quickened, though he tried to mask it with calm indifference. "I told you," she said simply, stepping closer. "Our bond connects us. Distance means nothing." Her nearness stirred something primal within him, a longing he couldn't suppress. "Why are you here?" he demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. "You said you'd wait." "And so I have," she replied evenly. "But waiting does not mean staying silent. Your doubts trouble you, and I cannot bear to see you suffer alone." Her empathy disarmed him, stripping away the walls he'd built around himself. "You don't understand," he said, frustration bubbling to the surface. "This isn't just about me. If I agree to this, if I let myself care, it puts everything at risk. My mission, my team, my life. I can't afford distractions." "Distractions," she repeated, her tone soft but laced with steel. "Is that what you think this is? A fleeting infatuation, easily dismissed? You underestimate the depth of what we share." "Maybe," he shot back, pacing now. "Or maybe you're overestimating it. Look, I'm grateful for whatever this connection is. Really, I am. But I'm not ready to throw away everything I've worked for based on some cosmic intuition." Her expression hardened, hurt flashing briefly in her eyes. "Do you truly believe I would ask this of you lightly? Do you think I take pleasure in risking my own safety, my honor, for someone unworthy?" "No," he snapped, stopping in his tracks. "That's not what I meant. I need proof. Something tangible. Anything to show me this isn't all in my head." For a long moment, she studied him, weighing his words. Then, without warning, she extended her hand toward him. "Take it," she urged. "Feel the truth for yourself." Hesitant but desperate for answers, he reached out and clasped her hand. The instant their palms touched, a surge of energy coursed through him, overwhelming and undeniable. Visions flooded his mind, images of distant worlds, ancient rituals, moments shared between them in lifetimes he couldn't remember living. He saw laughter, tears, triumphs, sacrifices. He saw love, pure and unyielding, stretching across eons. When the vision subsided, he staggered backward, gasping for air. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the ground, trembling. "It's real," he whispered hoarsely, staring up at her in awe. "All of it. You weren't lying." "No," she confirmed, kneeling beside him. Her touch was gentle as she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "And now you know why I chose you. Why I will always choose you." Tears welled in his eyes, blurring her shimmering form. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he allowed himself to feel hope. Hope that he wasn't alone. Hope that love could transcend boundaries he'd never dared to imagine. But as quickly as the emotion rose, it was tempered by grim reality. "If this bond is as powerful as you say," he murmured, "then we're in danger. Both of us. Your enemies won't stop coming, will they?" Her silence was answer enough. "We'll fight them together," she vowed, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her eyes. "No matter the cost." As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, the soldier knew his life would never be the same. Whether he liked it or not, he was bound to her, and she to him. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by a love older than time itself. Yet even as they prepared to stand side by side, shadows loomed on the periphery, hinting at trials far greater than either of them could foresee. Their journey was only beginning, and the choices they made next would shape not just their futures, but the fate of two worlds intertwined by destiny. The days that followed were a blur of tension and discovery. The soldier, whose name was Elias, found himself caught between two worlds, his own, defined by duty and discipline, and hers, steeped in ancient traditions and cosmic mysteries. Each moment spent with her deepened the connection they shared, but it also heightened the stakes. Every whispered conversation, every stolen glance, felt like a thread pulling them closer to an inevitable confrontation. Her name was Leora. She had finally revealed to him one quiet evening as they sat beneath the twin moons. It meant Lightbringer in her language, though Elias suspected it carried meanings far richer than mere translation could convey. She spoke little of her home or her people, but when she did, her words painted vivid images of towering crystalline cities that sang with harmonies only audible to those attuned to their frequencies. Her descriptions made Elias ache with longing, not for the place itself, but for the life she hinted at, one where he might belong beside her. Yet belonging came at a price. Leora's warnings about her people grew more urgent with each passing day. "They will not accept you," she said one night as they rested near the edge of a glowing lake. Its surface shimmered like liquid starlight, mirroring the constellations above. "To them, our bond is an aberration, a betrayal of everything we hold sacred." Elias frowned, tossing a pebble into the water. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection of the stars. "Then why choose me? Why risk everything if you knew how dangerous this would be?" Leora's gaze softened, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "Because love is worth any risk," she replied simply. "And because I believe our union can change things, not just for us, but for both our peoples. If we succeed, we could bridge the divide between humans and my kind. We could create something new, something beautiful." Her optimism stirred something within him, but doubt lingered. "You make it sound so easy," he muttered. "But what happens when your enemies come for us? What then?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and took his hand, her touch sending warmth coursing through him despite the chill in the air. "We fight," she said firmly. "Together. As equals." Elias wanted to believe her, to trust that their bond was strong enough to withstand whatever trials lay ahead. But doubt gnawed at him, whispering insidious thoughts. What if he failed her? What if his presence put her in even greater danger? It wasn't long before their fears became reality. The attack came without warning, shattering the fragile peace they'd carved out for themselves. One moment, they were walking through a grove of bioluminescent trees, their branches humming softly with energy. The next, the ground trembled beneath their feet as shadowy figures materialized from the darkness. "They've found us," Leora breathed, her voice tight with urgency. Her hand tightened around Elias's, and he felt a surge of protective instinct rise within him. "How many?" he asked, scanning the perimeter. His training kicked in automatically, assessing threats and calculating odds. There were 6 of them, cloaked in dark robes that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their faces were obscured, but their intentions were clear. "Too many," Leora replied grimly. "Stay close to me." The first figure lunged, moving faster than Elias thought possible. He barely managed to raise his rifle in time, firing off a shot that grazed the attacker's shoulder. The creature let out a guttural snarl, its form flickering briefly before stabilizing again. Elias realized with growing dread that these weren't ordinary beings. They were hunters, bred for combat and imbued with powers he couldn't begin to comprehend. "Leora!" he shouted, ducking behind a tree as another bolt of energy whizzed past his head. "What are they?" "Enforcers," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "Sent by the Council to eliminate threats to our traditions." With a wave of her hand, she summoned a barrier of shimmering light that deflected an incoming blast. "They won't stop until we're dead, or worse." Elias gritted his teeth, firing another round. "Options." "We run," she said, grabbing his arm. "Now." They sprinted through the forest, dodging blasts of energy and leaping over roots that threatened to trip them. The enforcers pursued relentlessly, their movements unervingly precise. Elias glanced back once and saw one of them raise a hand, summoning a sphere of crackling energy. Before he could shout a warning, the sphere exploded, sending a shockwave rippling through the air. The force of the blast knocked him off his feet, and he hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his side, and for a moment, all he could see was white. Through the haze, he heard Leora cry out his name. "Elias!" She was at his side in an instant, her hands glowing as she placed them over his wound. Warmth spread through him, dulling the pain but not erasing it entirely. "Can you move?" He nodded, struggling to sit up. "Yeah. Barely." "We need to keep moving," she urged, helping him to his feet. "They're closing in." But even as she spoke, the enforcers emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. Their leader stepped forward, lowering his hood to reveal a face that was eerily similar to Leora's, but colder, harsher. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his voice carried the weight of authority. "Leora," he intoned, his tone devoid of emotion. "You have disgraced our lineage. Surrender now, and perhaps the council will show mercy." Her jaw clenched, defiance blazing in her eyes. "I will never surrender to you," she spat. "This bond is sacred, sanctioned by forces beyond your understanding. You cannot destroy what fate has decreed." The leader's expression darkened. "Fate?" he sneered. "You speak of destiny as though it were law. But laws are written by those who wield power, and today, that power belongs to us." With a flick of his wrist, he unleashed a torrent of energy that sent both Elias and Leora sprawling. Elias struggled to rise, his body protesting every movement, but Leora was already on her feet, her form radiating with an intensity that made the very air hum. "You underestimate us," she declared, her voice ringing with power. "If you want to take him from me, you'll have to kill me first." Elias watched in awe as she raised her arms, calling forth a cascade of light that illuminated the forest. The enforcers faltered, momentarily blinded by the brilliance. Seizing the opportunity, Leora grabbed Elias's hand and pulled him toward a narrow ravine hidden by dense foliage. "Jump!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Without hesitation, Elias followed her lead, plunging into the darkness below. The fall was brief but jarring, landing them in a shallow stream that cushioned their descent. Water soaked through his clothes, but he barely noticed. All he could focus on was Leora, who stood beside him, breathing heavily but unyielding. "We need to keep moving," she said, her voice strained but resolute. "They'll regroup soon." Elias nodded, forcing himself to stand despite the throbbing pain in his side. "Where to?" "There's a sanctuary," she explained, leading him upstream. "A place hidden even from the council. If we can reach it, we might stand a chance." As they pressed onward, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded rather than escaping. The enforcers' attack had been brutal, yes, but calculated. They hadn't killed them outright, hadn't used their full strength. It was almost as if they were playing a game, testing their resolve. "Do you think they're letting us go?" he asked after a while, voicing the suspicion that had been nagging at him. Leora hesitated, her steps faltering slightly. "Perhaps," she admitted. "Or perhaps they're driving us somewhere specific. Either way, we have no choice but to keep moving." The realization weighed heavily on Elias, but he pushed it aside. Whatever awaited them, they would face it together. That much was certain. Hours later, they reached the sanctuary, a cavern nestled deep within the mountains, its entrance concealed by cascading vines. Inside, the air was cool and still, filled with the faint scent of minerals and earth. Crystals embedded in the walls pulsed with a soft, rhythmic glow, casting the space in hues of blue and violet. "This place, it's alive," Elias murmured, running his fingers along the smooth surface of a crystal. Energy tingled beneath his touch, resonant and alive. "It is," Leora confirmed, sinking to the ground with exhaustion etched across her features. "An ancient refuge, created by those who believed in the unity of all beings. Here we are safe for now." Elias joined her, sitting cross-legged as he examined the makeshift bandage she'd fashioned for his wound. "How long do we have?" "Not long," she admitted, her gaze distant. "The council will send more enforcers, stronger ones. This reprieve is temporary." Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken fears and unresolved questions. Finally, Elias broke it. "Why does the council hate humans so much? Is it just because of tradition?" Leora sighed, leaning back against the cavern wall. "It's more complicated than that. Centuries ago, there was a war, a conflict between my people and yours. Humans sought to colonize our worlds, exploiting our resources and disregarding our ways of life. Many lives were lost on both sides. In the aftermath, the Council enacted strict laws forbidding contact with outsiders. To them, your kind represents destruction and chaos. But that was centuries ago, Elias argued. Things have changed since then. Humans aren't perfect, but we've learned. We've grown. I know, she said softly, reaching out to take his hand. That's why I chose you. Because I see the potential for change. Not just in you, but in all of us. Together, we can rewrite the story of our peoples. But first, we must survive. Elias squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her touch. Then we'll survive, he vowed. No matter what it takes. For a fleeting moment, they allowed themselves to rest, finding solace in each other's presence. But outside the sanctuary, the storm was gathering. Shadows moved across the horizon, converging on their location. The Council's patience was wearing thin, and their next move would be decisive. When dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Elias and Leora prepared to leave the sanctuary. They knew the battle ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Yet as they stepped into the light, hand in hand, they faced it with unwavering determination. Their journey was far from over. And though the path ahead was fraught with peril, they walked it together, bound by a love that transcended time, space, and fear itself. The journey out of the sanctuary was fraught with tension, every step echoing in the vast silence of the cavern. Elias and Leora moved cautiously, their senses heightened as they scanned for any sign of pursuit. The crystals lining the walls dimmed slightly as they passed, as though reluctant to let them go. It felt like leaving behind a fragile haven, stepping back into a world that seemed determined to tear them apart. But neither hesitated. They had no choice but to press forward. As they emerged into the open air, the twin moons bathed the landscape in silver light, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. For a moment, they paused, taking in the eerie beauty of the alien world. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, there was an undeniable magic here, a sense that something greater than themselves was at play. "We can't stay still for long," Leora murmured, her voice low but steady. She glanced over her shoulder, her luminous eyes scanning the horizon. "They'll find us soon." Elias nodded, tightening his grip on his rifle. "Then we keep moving. Where to now?" "There's a place," she said, pointing toward a distant range of jagged peaks. "A temple older than the Council itself. If we can reach it, we might be able to strengthen our bond enough to shield us from their power." Her words sparked a flicker of hope within him. "You mean, make this connection between us permanent? Like, unbreakable?" She smiled faintly, though there was sadness in her expression. "Yes. But it won't be easy. The ritual requires both of us to confront our deepest fears, our most painful memories. Only then can we truly become one." Elias swallowed hard, his mind racing. He'd faced countless battles in his life, endured horrors that haunted his dreams. Yet the thought of delving into his own psyche, exposing his vulnerabilities to Leora, and worse, to himself, felt almost unbearable. Still, he knew what was at stake. If this was the only way to protect her, to ensure their future together, he would do it. "Let's go," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. "Whatever it takes." The trek to the temple was grueling, testing their endurance and resolve. The enforcers pursued them relentlessly, forcing them to take circuitous routes through treacherous landscapes. At times, it felt like the entire planet conspired against them. Sudden storms, collapsing cliffs, even feral creatures drawn by the chaos. Each obstacle brought them closer to their breaking point, but also deepened their reliance on one another. One night, as they huddled beneath the shelter of an overhang, Elias found himself staring at Leora as she slept. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale with exhaustion. She looked so fragile, so human despite her otherworldly nature. It struck him then how much she had sacrificed for him, for them. She had defied her people, risked her life, all because she believed in the possibility of something better. He reached out tentatively, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. His touch stirred her awake, and she blinked up at him, her eyes softening when she saw his expression. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. He hesitated, unsure how to put his feelings into words. "I want you to know that I'm not doing this because I feel obligated. I'm doing it because I believe in us. In what we could build together." Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering like starlight. "Elias," she breathed, reaching up to cup his cheek. "You have no idea how much those words mean to me." For a moment, they simply held each other, drawing strength from the quiet intimacy of the moment. When dawn broke, they set off again, renewed determination burning in their hearts. When they finally reached the temple, it was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Carved into the side of a mountain, its spires reached skyward, glowing faintly as if imbued with the same energy that pulsed through Leora. Intricate patterns adorned its surface, shifting and changing as though alive. The air around it hummed with power, making the hairs on Elias's arms stand on end. "This is it," Leora said, her voice filled with awe. "The heart of unity." As they approached, the massive doors creaked open, revealing a chamber bathed in golden light. At its center stood a pedestal, atop which rested a crystalline orb pulsating with radiant energy. Leora stepped forward, her movements reverent. "To complete the bond," she explained, turning to face him, "we must place our hands on the orb simultaneously. It will guide us through the ritual, showing us what we need to see. But remember, Elias, this isn't just about overcoming fear. It's about trusting each other completely." He nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "I trust you," he said, his voice unwavering. "With my life." She smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she took his hand. Together, they placed their palms on the orb. Instantly, the world around them dissolved, plunging them into a realm of pure consciousness. Memories flooded their minds, not just their own, but shared experiences spanning lifetimes they couldn't recall living. They saw moments of joy and sorrow, triumph and failure, love and loss. They relived the pain of separation, the ache of longing, the despair of believing they were alone. But through it all, they held on to each other, refusing to let go. And slowly, the darkness began to recede, replaced by a blinding light that filled them with warmth and peace. In that light, they understood. Their bond wasn't just a connection between two souls, it was a force capable of bridging worlds, of healing wounds centuries old. When they returned to the physical plane, the orb shattered into 1,000 shards, scattering across the chamber. Elias and Leora collapsed to their knees, gasping for breath. But as they looked at each other, they knew something fundamental had changed. Their bond was now unbreakable, a beacon of unity that radiated outward, touching everything around them. Outside, the enforcers gathered, their dark forms blotting out the stars. But when they entered the temple, they froze, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the energy emanating from Elias and Leora. One by one, they lowered their weapons, bowing their heads in reverence. "The bond has been forged," the leader said, his voice trembling with awe. "It is beyond the council's authority to sever." Leora rose to her feet, pulling Elias up beside her. "This is the beginning of a new era," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "An era of understanding, of cooperation. No longer will fear dictate our actions. Together, we will forge a future where all beings are free to choose their destinies." The enforcers exchanged glances, uncertainty giving way to resolve. Slowly, they retreated, disappearing into the night. As the first rays of sunlight crested the horizon, bathing the temple in warm hues, Elias turned to Leora. She smiled at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "We did it," she whispered, wrapping her arms around him. "We did," he agreed, holding her close. "And we'll keep doing it, for as long as we live." In that moment, surrounded by the promise of a brighter future, they knew their love had transcended not just time and space, but hatred and division. Together, they had rewritten the story of their peoples, proving that even in the darkest of times, hope could prevail. And so, under the watchful gaze of twin moons, Elias and Leora embraced, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with unwavering faith in each other and in the boundless potential of their love.